Hey, what's up? It's Jesko again from AcousticsInsider.com, where I teach home studio acoustic treatment techniques for audio professionals, but without all the voodoo. I'm back for the last video in this series that I'm doing in collaboration with Hedd Audio. In a minute, I'm going to be talking to Freddy Knop, the CEO of Hedd Audio, about what it means to run a company like Hedd Audio, but more importantly, what it means for him to be in touch with us, his customers, what he's learned about us pro music, pro audio customers, about what we want from a modern, an up-to-date speaker. But before I get into that, real quick, if you want to watch the other 10 videos that I've made in this series, have a look at the link in the card. And if you're in the market for a new speaker, a Hedd Audio speaker, have a look at the link in the description. That is an affiliate link. If you buy your set of Hedd Audio speakers through that link, you'll basically be supporting me with what I do here at Acoustics Insider. But with that, let's jump right into this interview. It's a fascinating insight into what it means to be head of a company, head of a loudspeaker company in the 21st century. I really hope you enjoy this talk with Freddy Knop, CEO of Hedd Audio. So I'm joined here by Freddy, CEO of Hedd Audio. First of all, Freddy, I wanted to say thank you for the past weeks, the past months, really allowing me to film and do my thing around your company. It's been really good fun. It's been pretty much just a pleasure, really, filming here and doing my thing. Obviously, thanking Felix as well, who's behind the camera now, for doing such an awesome job. So thank you, Felix. It's been really, really great. And for this, what is probably going to be the, for now, final video in this series that we do together, I really wanted to put the spotlight onto you because you've been in the background more up till this point. But obviously, as the CEO of the company, there's a certain role that you have to play in all of this. There's a certain expertise you bring to the company that is quite different to what we've seen so far, or to what we've discussed so far. So just to get us started, you've been the CEO since 2017, roundabout. The sole head of the company, I guess. Can you just tell us what's your progress, or what's your development? How did you end up in this position? What led you to be in this position that you're in now?
Sure. So I am originally a musicologist, and I've studied musicology. I finished a PhD program around 2000. When was that? Like probably 10 or 11, I don't even remember. I did a lot of research on classical and contemporary classical music, specifically composition technique, music theory, and performance. Although these fields are just segments of a much larger pool of disciplines that musicology is, essentially. But that was always my specific focus and my fascination with music, how it is actually built in detail, like something that fascinates me, something that blows me away, like how is it actually made in the craft, of things. And then I transitioned into a full-time mastering engineer. Mastering was something I've always done, also while I was in the PhD program, since I have a pretty good network of independent musicians, bands, labels from my own musicianship background, so to say. And but all that didn't really lead to running this place. What actually happened was that I teamed up with my father in 2014. My father, as you know, is a pretty severe speaker maniac, and him coming from physics and from more classical music and engineering, me coming from the actual user perspective, seemed to make a lot of sense back in the days when we thought about founding a brand together. And he's been the head of engineering and founder of Adam. and but left the company in 2014. And then we had this like very specific moment in time that, and I think a lot of people around us found that made a lot of sense even before we realized that it could make a lot of sense to do something together. And yeah, the rest is Hedd Audio. We founded in 2015, started shipping monitors in 16, and now 5 years later, we have built a pretty impressive brand, I hope.
I would say so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So with your dad being more the engineer and originally kind of driving this creation of these products and these companies from the engineering side, leading from the engineering side as well.
Yeah.
You coming from the musicology background, music, the creative part of music as part of your education, as part of your main background.
Yeah, that's true. Wow.
How does that now influence how you steer the company, if you will?
Well, I think the first years, everyone who worked at Hedd had to shoulder so many different things. Like, it's been really like the sort of startup you would imagine with,
startup tornado.
Like days and nights of stress and thrill, and it took pretty much like 4 to 5 years before I could slowly, transform into the position that I really enjoy now, and that's the position of, pretty much head of brand, building a culture around the brand, being in touch with the community of engineers and producers globally. That's very fulfilling for me. And then as a second sort of big chunk of my work here, the product strategy, and to imagine where this company could go in the next years and what products we could make. And this is sort of the ideal positioning for me. Whereas obviously we have like a professional management now. We have a COO on board that is taking care of all the things that a company needs to do as well.
Sure.
From purchasing to the logistics to obviously sales. Although sales and marketing are very close to each other.
And very tied together.
Especially now, hasn't been like that like 10 or 20 years ago.
So in the end, you're with product strategy, branding. That means you're very, very close to your clients, close to your customers, and wandering about the company these past weeks, I've definitely noticed that you are in very direct contact with the customers. Oftentimes, when people email the kind of what's the standard Hedd email, info@Hedd.audio, whatever. You're potentially the person that responds. If people message on the Instagram channel or on the Instagram account, you're potentially one of the people who actually responds. So you like to stay very close to the clients, as far as I noticed.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I think, it has definitely several aspects. One aspect is that I, as the person that I am with the background that I have, feel very close to the actual engineer, and I love hanging out in studios. I'm a gear nerd myself. I know exactly what gear fever feels like. I have it once in a while, at least once a year. I'm going through the marketing funnel, like really like exemplary.
Buy some useless product that you don't actually need.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I can give you some good examples. No, but the real reason is that I'm, honestly speaking, quite obsessed with the way that the brand is perceived. And I think it's crucially important to understand what customers think of you as a brand, and potential customers, how they perceive your products, the technology, the visuals, the visual representation of your brand, the communication. And it is ultimately also a way to learn what we could do better in the future. Sure. We're getting a lot of affirmation for things we do, but we're also obviously getting critical voices, and it's important to sort of suck them in as well and see what you can learn from that. And ultimately, the whole UX part of it's like, are there ideas floating around in conversations we have with customers that could potentially play a role in a future product? So for the longest time, I've actually replied personally on everything that came through InfoAd, and now I have some help in the background, but I still look at most of the emails and most of, for example, Instagram and Facebook direct messages in order to keep in touch with the culture in which we need to sell our products.
Yeah. Excellent. I mean, I think it's very admirable. I know it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So for anybody obviously who's been following me, they know that the only thing I do is YouTube, and I'm not even in the YouTube comments just because it's too time consuming, and it doesn't. It's just unfortunately too low down in terms of priorities for me. So that's why I do my knowledge bombs every once in a while, where I answer the YouTube comments.
Yeah.
But so I know just how time intensive it is. But on the other hand, it is where you really learn what your customers want, like hands down on the ground, in the trenches, if you will.
Yeah.
Which brings me basically to the question that is the title of this entire video, right? So what does the pro customer, pro audio customer, pro music customer want? What have you learned about the typical pro music customer since doing this, since being so involved with them? What are the typical issues they come with? What problems would they like to see solved?
I think if I think about who the current Hedd customer is usually, maybe I can start with that. I think it's usually upgraders. So I don't think we have a lot of people who start their musical journey as producers or as engineers with a pair of Hedd speakers. It's usually people coming from products that live more in the lower budget market, or in the mid-range sort of budget market, and but they already, if they're professionals, then that's a different question. But if I think we have a lot of producers also with sort of who do what they do in a very sophisticated, like passionate, but probably hobbyistic way, and they're probably on this like journey to make a living of it at some point. So I would say professional recording engineers and producers on all sort of levels are our main customers. And I mean, they reach out to us when they're working on the acoustics in their room, for example, or when they move to a different room and they think, the potential of working in a much better environment probably makes it necessary to also upgrade the monitoring system with which they work. And so we're doing a lot of like assistance. We, give them advice, what we think, could be the correct sort of mix of gear. And we have people upgrading from 2-way to 3-way systems, and that's, I couldn't stretch that enough. Very often we have people who seek orientation by, looking at producers or studios that they admire themselves. So very often we have people. Let's say we have a producer reaching out to us. I think I've been watching Illmind or Richard Devine or Hebb Kadri use your headphone for a year now, and I really want to check it out myself now. And can you advise me where I can demo it or something like that? And then it becomes very clear to me that how important it actually is to take care of the community and make sure that people are being helped when they reach out to us. And
I mean, you just mentioned that people might see that some of the producers, engineers that they look up to use your products.
Yeah.
There are quite a few VIPs in your client roster. Just in this past week, you released a video of Jazzy Jeff, DJ Jazzy Jeff, just loving the Type 30s. How do those corporations come about? In particular, maybe we're talking about Jazzy Jeff. How did that happen? How did he get in touch with you?
Well, I think very often, surprisingly often, in a very uncorporate way. Through social media, through very simple communication, through people hooking us up with their contacts. Like, it's a very organic sort of communication system where everyone is like trying to help each other. I think that's one of the biggest assets we have as a brand right now, is that we are that we are not like an abstract company that is really big and sort of complicated to deal with. We are a bunch of people in Berlin building everything ourselves, being
so you can react
as
fast.
responsive, being as responsive as possible. And I think even people on the level of Jazzy Jeff, appreciate that passion, I think, that lives in us wherever we might work in the complex that is this company. And I think in his case, I think it just clicked, and he found the brand fascinating. He liked to deal with us, and he ultimately, and that's really important, you have to bring them in front of the products before talking marketing or digital advertising. All this stuff comes after. Like, usually we're trying to be as flexible and fast about sending our products to people that we find interesting, and then we have a conversation based on their impressions on the products. That's been the number one marketing strategy for us in the last years. Obviously, being a company that doesn't have like $100,000 to spend every week on whatever it is,
Instagram
so
posts.
it's kind of like a guerrilla tactics that plays an important role here.
Yeah, that's the 21st century.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
So maybe let's talk about the kind of the product scope, the different tiers of products that you have at the moment, and the different types of customers that kind of typically use these products. Obviously behind us we see the Type 20. We've talked about that a lot. And jumping right to the almost upper tier, the tower mains right next to them. How do the customers what's the difference between the customers that would purchase a Type 20 and who in comparison to the tower mains? Who the hell would buy tower mains? What's the difference in priority there for a customer that they would say, instead of spending $4,000 for a pair, let's pay $30 for a pair, or for one. I don't know how expensive they are, in fact, but So what's the difference in priority there for a customer, for the typical, or for the user of that product in the end?
Well, I would say in the value, like if we talk about these two models, like it's clear the Type 20 is the one that is economically way more important for us, because that's the product that has the most overlap with our customer base, I would say, because it works in very small rooms, it works in bigger recording studios, it has, obviously, it's attractive for people who work in recording studios. It's attractive to people who, I don't know, like make beats essentially, at home, and everything in between. So I would say that defining the customer for Type 20 is kind of hard, because
it's broader.
It's a super broad audience, I think, especially for that product. And it was a really conscious decision to make it as compact as possible, but to keep it like an active three-way speaker with all the features that come with the MK2. Being the phase alignment, being the ability to use them closed as well as with the ports open. And so I think it makes it the most universal speaker out of everything we do now and we've done in the past. And the towers, man, that's kind of hard to say. I mean, I would say that 50% of tower customers are actually private people.
Oh yeah, interesting.
Putting them in their living rooms.
Interesting. So it's more just sort of high fidelity, hi-fi listening rooms.
I would say that's probably half of it. And we have them in different finishes as well. Plus we can actually customize the color. So we've sold them in various forms, so to say. And the other half is I would say commercially successful producers and mastering engineers. And who actually have a big enough room for the system to make sense, and who at the same time work with smaller monitors as well. And then often it has like a representative function when the label comes in, to take the record, and then there's a last listening session or a public listening session for like a new record that comes out. We had that in the UK a few times, and then they put the music on the towers, and it just fills the room with all the precision and emotion that this system has over the other things in the portfolio. And so I would say it's a healthy mix of professionals and people who think about hi-fi in a more modern mindset, I would say. So people who rather think in streaming devices with XLR outs, so they can just plug an active speaker on. They have like a fully working streaming-based listening environment. I think And I mean, this is sort of the tendency of the time, I would say. We don't really have a solution for someone who, you know, who is a vinyl player and still like loves his cassette deck and, you know, like
Sure.
yeah, the classic stereo. Like
Sure.
this is quite far away from what we have in mind for now.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe talking about mastering engineers, that's something that I don't discuss too much on my channel because I'm mainly talking about home studios.
Yeah.
Mastering does happen in home studios. People master on the Type 20s.
Absolutely.
But from your experience, is there a difference between a mixing and a mastering speaker? If yes, what is it? If no, why not?
Well, I think like the ideal mastering speaker would probably be a speaker that is closed. It would be a speaker that takes care of phase issues in the design. It would probably be a speaker that covers the entire like audible frequency spectrum. It would be a speaker that sounds amazing when playing very quiet, as well as a speaker that can be very loud to impress. And I think all these features, you know, will be equally relevant for anyone who would do like a mixing job or
Sure.
anyone who would you know, work in whatever field of audio production. So I would say there are definitely speaker designs that are especially well suited for mastering, but I wouldn't say that there are mastering speakers and mixing speakers and production speakers. I mean, the lower the budget, I think the more often you would find companies tuning their speakers in a specific way to appeal to a certain market audience by over-exaggerating bass or the high frequency range or something like that. But I think on the level that we live on, it's really more about making speakers as transparent and fast and you know, helpful as possible for the actual job.
So basically, in the end, a mastering speaker just follows the same direction that a good quality speaker goes down anyway, just further, basically. It just
exactly.
It tries to compromise on less. Let's just say that.
Yeah,
like that.
And I mean, it's really about like what you define as good. I mean, in our case, a good speaker is a speaker that can make your life in the studio more fun and more flexible and just ultimately faster because you can trust what you hear. But you know, that's not the kind of good that you would you know, consider to be part of a discussion on Bluetooth speakers or something. You know, so we live in our niche, and within our niche, we're trying to be best in class. That's the approach with everything we do. Yeah.
So does that mean that you built yourself the best possible mastering speaker that you could imagine with the Tower Mains?
Well, I think they are damn good mastering speakers. Absolutely. There was a lot of mastering conversation, mastering-related conversation when we designed them. I think they should tick a lot of boxes for people who are actually serious about this profession. And
maybe put in another way, did what you learned working as a mastering engineer feed back into the design of the Tower Mains?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think it's you know, with everyone working here, with my father being a part of obviously a big part of the development process, with Dimitri, who we also met, being the new head of R&D here in-house, plus myself and a few other people who have good ears and a history in this industry. I think although we might have like differences when it comes to, I don't know, tuning or differences in taste or something, but I think generally, and that is something that clearly comes from my background, being surrounded by high quality gear and great sounding gear, the goal is to, you know, bring the best possible sound quality at the best possible build quality, and that's something a mastering engineer, you know, obviously also has as a mindset when he surrounds himself or herself with all the mastering great gear that is usually of amazing quality.
Mm-hmm. So does that mean you have a pair of Tower Mains in your living room?
No, absolutely not. Like
No?
I have I have actually my living room is relatively quite speakerless, to be honest.
Is it?
Yeah, because I have kids, and so it's kind of, I mean, there's probably GBL goes in various colors in the apartment. But I do have a desk where I work from time to time, and that desk has a Type 5 compact studio monitor from us, connected to a merging Anubis interface, which, talking Gear Fever was like one of my main Gear Fever moments a few years ago when that came out. And I do have, among the studio equipment that I still have, there is a pair of Type 30s. And there is one of the first ever built Adam S3As, actually. I think it's one of the first 10 serial numbers or something. And I remember we brought this to the Frankfurt Musikmesse in 2000 or something, and it was on display there. And I remember Rupert Neve passing by the booth and sort of turning his head because he heard something interesting. And that was the beginning of a really friendly relationship we had with Rupert until, pretty much he died.
Sure.
And he was among the first people in the US to buy a pair of early Adam speakers. So I'm guarding this pair, and it has a huge emotional meaning to me. So
amazing.
Yeah.
But so it's you don't have it set up at the moment. It's not your daily driver, let's say.
No, I set it up from time to time. But right now, there's not much time to enjoy like the sound of an old Adam speaker. It's really more something for the museum.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what is your daily driver? What do you listen most on usually?
Well, I'm mostly here in a company.
Yeah.
So I do have a headphone. We can talk about that one. I have a headphone at my desk, so I can kind of, if I don't want to hear everything around me, because we have quite a bit of people working in the same office, I'm grabbing the headphones. And other than that, I try to sneak over into the laboratory from time to time to just, keep in touch with the speaker sound and just, listen to music from time to time, just, in my lunch break or something, or when everyone is going in the evening, I'm just hang out here and turn on the towers for a moment or something. And so that I don't forget how they sound, because I'm dealing so much with the product, but the actual listen experience shouldn't be lost over all the operational work that has to be done every day.
Yeah. So you just mentioned the headphone. Maybe let's do a quick tangent over to that.
Yeah.
It's an amazing product. It's a unique product, as in there is nothing like it on the market apart from the headphone. Can you tell me real quick how, or real long, however you want, how that product got created? What's the story behind the headphone?
Yeah. Well, the headphone is based on the air motion transformer technology, which plays a huge role in all the tweeters and our speakers, and that's the technology that my father came out with in the 80s. It's based on an old idea by a German-American physicist, Oscar Heil. It was mentioned before, and one of the most fascinating ideas for us, and I think it needed that sort of free mindset that comes with launching a new company from scratch. The fascinating idea of turning that technology into like a full range device, because these tweeters, they usually play until like 2,500 hertz or something, and then there's a crossover. But with headphones, you have completely different rules. Less acoustic pressure, other mechanics. So there's a lot you can do, and the headphone is actually a result of more than a year of trial and error. If we can make this tweeter into a full-range device that would work in a headphone. So, and in a way, that's the most important and significant research and development move for us, because it made us very proud when we succeeded, because it means that we were able to take the technology, and that's very much our own technology, and it's core integrated part of our family history and my father's history as a speaker designer, to take this and bring it to the next evolutionary step, so to say, and the headphone is that next evolutionary step. And by having brought that product to the market, we at the same time decided that the future for us as a brand should not be limited to making speakers, but it should also incorporate future headphone designs as well. I think it's the beginning of a second path of the company that we're really trying to follow now.
It's definitely a pro speaker, right? I mean, or is it again talking about customers?
Yeah.
What would you say? Who buys a headphone?
Yeah, well, that's very interesting. I would say that the first 300 to 500 units were actually sold to obsessed headphone collectors and people who live in this like upper priced range of headphones where you would find like quirky, interesting designs and there's a culture of these headphones that you would find in something like headfi.org, and they have their own like trade shows, which are the Can Jam shows, and I had no idea about all this, I have to say. It was just Chris Parkinson, who used to work for Odise and then worked for us for years. Like he sort of introduced us to this culture of the headphone, so to say. Because as a professional, I'm sure you relate, headphones that cost more than $1,000 and that have to do more than just being problem detectors essentially. Like this, there's no consciousness about this. I find, and so that was a surprising beginning of the product. But then it slowly, because there's a limit to this group of people. Obviously, it's a very small world, but it's full of passion and full of dedication and. Nowadays, we're selling most of them to, I would say, mastering engineers and producers, and I think we're riding that wave of, the question like how far can I actually get with a headphone if I seriously produce, mix or master a record? And I think the times are slowly changing. There's definitely an increasing importance of headphones in studios, and I think the headphone is actually really, as much as I love our speakers, but I think it's a very suitable tool to do serious audio work, and much more than just looking for the occasional editing mistake or like a little resonance or something. I think you can achieve much more with it.
What's the number one feedback that you get on the headphone from customers? What's the first thing that people remark when they listen to it?
It's definitely the resolution of the device and the stereo imaging. I mean, the staging is quite wide. Like it's positioning of signals are really very well possible with this. And and it shares, and I didn't really know that before we actually started trying, it actually shares some of the sonic properties of the speakers as well. So if you're familiar with the head sound, if you like the openness, transparency of these tweeters, then you feel quite comfortable, then you will feel quite comfortable when using a headphone. And in addition to that, it's just really fascinating to hear it reaching that low, because it reaches as low as 10 hertz, and to hear,
10 hertz, okay.
And that's been super fascinating for me and my father to hear these little tweeters all of a sudden give you like serious sub-bass information was quite irritating, but it works very well, I think.
Interesting, yeah. May I ask, what is the next step? If you're willing to divulge secrets, what is the next step for the AMT?
I mean, for the AMT, it's quite obvious that we are aiming to make more headphones in the future. Nothing is really around the corner, like immediately.
So this would be probably bringing the price down to some extent to make something that is more affordable?
Yeah, I mean, yes, but that would not be the next step for me. For me, it's really more about reaching out to new audiences, because the headphone as it is right now is an open back headphone with quite a bit of weight. So it's, you can't really take it out. You can't really record an instrument with it because it's open back, and it's a little too heavy to like shake your head around. So there are limitations to what this model can do.
Right.
It's great at what it does, but it's certainly quite limited in its nature. So we would have to consider the recording musician. We would have to we have some really amazing ideas for further innovation in the field of headphones. And so it's really more about like broadening the field for our headphone technology, and I'm trying to be fast about it with the team, because I think it's a really unique chance for us, coming into the headphone market with a with our very own technology, that doesn't happen very often. When planar came into the headphone market, that was a defining moment. And electrostats, and then it's dynamic, and dynamic headphones make up 99% of the market. So I think we have a really big opportunity now. Yeah, and the learning process that comes with designing headphones based on AMT technology, this is something we will also consider for future tweeter developments, obviously, because it's like an on and off. Like the original tweeter made us refine the driver in order to make the headphone, and now we learn so much from making headphone drivers that there's probably a way to also incorporate some of these learnings into speaker-related AMT technology as well. So I mean, yeah, we're definitely trying to we're definitely putting a lot of pressure.
So there's something happening on that front.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, a lack of ideas is the least of our problems.
Yeah, usually,
it's really more about like, what do we do next? What makes sense? What makes sense now? What makes sense in like 2 and 3 years? But there's a huge amount of ideas floating in these rooms. Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect segue, because possibly maybe the final question that I wanted to ask you for this talk is, what does it take to develop a new speaker? You have a very complete roster, it seems, of speakers that covers a broad range of potential customers in the pro audio market, in the hi-fi market as well.
Yeah.
What does it take? Almost. Fair enough.
Yeah.
What does it take to develop a new speaker these days, or rather maybe when you're thinking about developing the next generation?
Yeah.
What are thoughts that come into your head about the approach, maybe in terms of what the customers want as well, bringing that in?
Yeah.
How do you go about developing the next generation of speakers?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think the portfolio isn't complete yet, because I mean, I don't want to mention any brands, but obviously, like, there is a life of speakers beyond what we do with the Type 30.
Right.
There's the whole like idea of main monitors, and but main monitors shouldn't be looking like main monitors used to look in the 80s or 90s. Like we're not really interested in making these like huge, cupboard sort of box speakers. But I think there are good reasons why this genre of speakers still exists. So this is something we're looking into, quite honestly. And there's competition for this, obviously. Also, some of the best speaker brands have products in that range, and we think that we can bring something very special to the table there as well. And then with up-and-coming, 3D audio technologies like Dolby Atmos or 3D and other things, I think it is worth looking into like even more compact designs in the future, and also increasing accessories, for an example, the whole mounting kits, decouplers, like all those sort of things that are part of the speaker environment. We have a long list of things that we want to do, but this is the stuff that usually like gets pushed further. But yeah, I really want to invest there. And to your other question, I mean, I think more than ever, it comes from two directions. Our expertise, obviously, is the ability to listen properly, and it's the ability to evaluate materials which are used in order to make speakers. So it's really, I would say that's a big asset for this company, that we keep track with new developments in driver technologies, in diaphragm materials, cabinets, converter technology, all these sort of things that you have to have in mind if you want to keep your speakers on a certain level, and you want to, stay in time, with contemporary reproduction technology. And then there's, on the other hand, obviously the user experience. I mean, it's the perfect world for us, because we have hundreds and thousands of customers, pretty much like a couple of clicks away, that we can actually ask, and so helping us in the research and development process, and incorporating feedback from chosen users, depending on what sort of product we want to make, has a really increasing importance in this company. Like, for an example, we're working on a prototype can't tell you much, but
Okay.
I work on a prototype right now, and so in September, October or something, we will invite 5 to 10 people from within the industry that we respect and that have experience with the sort of product that we want to make. And we invite them to Berlin as a sort of focus group, essentially, and preparing questions, showing them what we think is great, gathering all their feedback, and then probably we will see how aligned we are at the end of the day. And if there's new ideas coming to the table, then we're more than happy to consider them in our redesign phases. So, and I think that's the way to go. And it has never been easier to act like that. Yeah.
Excellent. That sounds really fun. I hope I get an email at that point.
Yeah.
Focusing on all the positives, maybe let's also just be self-critical for once. What is the main complaint people have about the current MK2 portfolio?
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, maybe hasn't worked quite so well as you would have liked?
Yeah, I mean, fair question. I think I would say that the transition from a speaker manufacturer that makes analog speakers to a speaker manufacturer that makes DSP-based speakers came with some challenges for sure. And for example, like, the need to update your firmware from time to time. No one likes to do that, but we're trying to better the performance and the usability of our speakers. Sure. So it's quite important to do that from time to time. We won't dump like a firmware update to our customers like every
2 weeks,
2 weeks or something. But from time to time that's important. And then obviously our firmware update also gives you the opportunity to switch on and off the standby function of the speaker. And and now looking back, it would have been smarter to do that with a knob on the back plate, essentially, like physical interaction. And it's quite an important point, especially with people working in TV music or film music, where you have like a multi-channel 3D setup or something, and then after like half an hour, you have like a helicopter coming from the back, and that's the only moment where that speaker hanging on the wall like needs to do something, and then the speaker has to wake up, and then, like 10 seconds later you have like So these are like little practical things that are sometimes annoying for our customers, but then luckily we have a good solution for that. And if we equip a Dolby Atmos studio, for an example, and we did a few now, we pretty much ship the speakers with the standby function off from the warehouse. So we prepare everything so that they don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's always steep learning curves for us. Yeah.
Always things to improve.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So Freddy, first of all, thanks for taking the time to wrap up this conversation. What I'd be interested to know is, in your opinion, what ideally would people, users, consumers of the product take away for themselves once they are using Hedd speakers in their studios? What's kind of the main benefit for people when they use Hedd speakers?
Yeah. Well, I think it's a mix. It's on the one hand, I can assure everyone who's interested in this brand is that we are, very, very much focused on keeping up to date with today's possibilities in speaker design. We take great care of the materials we use. We think it's a huge advantage, not just for the branding, but also for the quality at the end, that we keep the production here in Berlin and do everything by hand with all the expertise that comes with the in-house production. We want to be perceived, and I think our products show that too, as a contemporary brand, a brand that doesn't really care so much about vintage, designs or as cool as that is, but that's really not us at all. I think the idea of combining like first-class, amazing materials that evolve over time, they get better, and we will incorporate better materials whenever we have a chance, and the actual listening experience from the people who actually tune the speakers here, because I think that's really important too. There's the material side of it, and theoretically we know how a speaker works, obviously, but then there's also the actual people that decide what the speaker will sound like at the end. And we're not victims of overanalyzing measurements. We also want to bring in our own perspective on what is good and accurate and transparent sounding. And I think we have a really good sort of, like, both these forces are very well represented in this company. So I think in 5 years, in 10 years, we will hopefully still be the brand that makes the best possible speaker for someone who's actually really serious about listening or about working professionally with audio.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah. I mean, one thing that I definitely noticed when I upgraded to the Type 20 is just the jump in detail, in quality, in visceralness. I'm not even sure how to describe it in comparison to my Adam P11s that I always used up until this point.
Yeah.
And I always find the best way to describe it is if the spectrum of what you're hearing kind of goes from here to here, that's what the P11s represented. And the Type 20s do represent the same breadth, but it's like stretched out up to here.
Yeah.
So what used to be a difference, an audible difference that was like this wide, because on that rubber band, it just goes whoop, and it's this wide. And so it's much easier to hear that difference.
Yeah.
And that just makes it much easier to work, because you can discern differences and details so much more easily.
Yeah.
At the same time, it also massively overwhelmed me for the first month or so, because now that you can hear that much of a difference, you realize I'd like to actually decide down to that minimal, that small degree, how I want things to sound. So suddenly you are working to a much higher standard of detail than you were before, and that for me really is the kind of the big difference that I noticed when I upgraded to the Type 20 from a speaker that came from the same designer 4 generations, 5 generations earlier. Which I found absolutely fascinating to experience, I guess, in the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's. I'm glad it is like that, because often, like when we designed the MK1 Type 20s, we were also thinking like, wow, this is amazing. This is the best speaker we've ever did. You know, and then you don't necessarily imagine that 2 or 3 years later, you're sitting in front like of a successor, and you think, well, it's just better, like, you know, and then you make the tower mains, and you know, it puts everything else in the shadow. And so I'm glad that there is this like organic development happening, and obviously it's not just the technical side of it. It's important. Obviously, a P11, you know, had a different woofer, had like different technology. Distortion was
off the charts,
way worse than it is today. And at the same time, you know, also the people who are behind the actual development, they go through a development themselves. My father looked at things different 20 years ago or 10 years ago, and he sharpened his, you know, listening skills as well over time. And so yeah, that's how you evolve, I think.
Absolutely. So maybe, Freddy, let's leave it at that. Thanks again for talking to me. Thanks again for taking the time. Thanks again for letting me be part of your machinery here for the past few weeks and months.
It's been a pleasure. You'll be missed every Monday.
I'm sure things will still happen. This isn't the end of it. But for now, I think this is a great place to wrap up.
Wonderful.
So thanks again, Freddy.
Very welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I'm back in the studio. Thanks again to Freddy for taking the time to talk to me. I hope that was as interesting to you as it was to me. Freddy's a really humble dude, as is the whole family. Maybe you've noticed if you've watched the previous videos, but there's an incredible amount of insight and love for us home studio, but pro audio people basically in the company, and a lot of understanding, a lot of curiosity and interest to help us do what we do best, work on music. So again, thanks to Freddy. And with that, I'm wrapping up this series. I'm wrapping up this video. Just quickly before I let you go, I've got a brand new workshop for you. This is the Phantom Speaker Test, how to set up your speakers correctly, no matter what room you're in. Usually when we're just setting up a studio, the first step is all about figuring out where to actually position our setup, right? Is it facing that wall? Is it facing this wall? What about that window? What about that door? I've got a closet in here. There's usually a bunch of questions that pop up in trying to figure out how to make best use of this room, and that's what I created the Phantom Speaker Test for. It's my process to guide you through figuring out where to position your setup, how to place your listening position to get the most balanced low end, and then set up your speakers to get a stereo image that sounds like you're working on headphones. If that sounds like something you want, if you're in the process of setting up a new studio, I want you to sign up to my Phantom Speaker Test workshop at the link in the description. And with that, that's it. Thanks for watching. From now on out, it's back to my studio. So next week, I'll see you from there. With that, thanks for watching, and let's keep remembering to learn to trust our ears and have fun making music in the studio. See you soon.